Hello, my name is Lisa Parker. I am the Director of Alumni Career and Business Services for the MSU Alumni Association. Welcome to today's webcast, which is part of our professional series webcast offerings. Today's topic, of course, effective job search strategies with recruiting agencies. Just a few housekeeping notes. As I mentioned, this is one of our professional series webcasts. We run webcasts the second and fourth Thursday of the month, covering a variety of topics relevant to individual professionals and sometimes to the business community. This is an open discussion forum, though our participants here are not mic'd. You are welcome to weigh in with questions and comments in the chat area on the left side of your screen. The portion to do so is actually that bottom rectangle on the left. I'm imagining that we have some recruiters in our mix today who are tuned in to hear this conversation. I would like to openly invite you to also say hello in our chat area if you're interested in having others in Spartan Nation know who you are. And you are welcome to add your own thoughts to some of the points that I'm making and some of the questions that perhaps come up in the chat area. So without further ado, we are recording this session, by the way, as I indicated in the first post in the chat area. For those interested in a recording, simply email me after the fact and we will make sure that that happens. So, effective job search strategies with recruiting agencies. This is an important topic for me. Prior to coming to Michigan State in May of last year, a significant portion of my professional background was actually as a third-party recruiter, as a headhunter, as a staffing agency professional, whatever you want to call me. And I know from that time, in that role, that there were a lot of positives that could be gained by job seekers working with recruiters. But I also came to know that that also involved at times a lot of frustration on the part of a job seeker. And we'll slip to the next slide here. These are the most common complaints that I would hear on any given day. Recruiters don't call me back. They haven't found me a job yet. Companies want to hire me, but the agency is charging too much. The recruiters won't tell me the names of the companies they are working with. They're just trying to pump me for leads and try to do business with my contacts. Maybe they don't really care about me. And the list could go on. They're giving me the indication that this company wants me and that I'm not hearing anything. These are the common list of complaints that I hear. If those of you who are listening want to weigh in with any others that are top of your mind, please feel free to do so. I'd be curious to hear what you have to say in terms of the downside. There are reasons why all of these complaints happen. Sometimes it really is on the shoulders of a recruiter. They're just not very good. They don't necessarily have the same professional level of professionalism that others do, and just like in any profession, there are some that are going to go the extra mile, and then there are others who maybe they're just learning the profession, or maybe it's just not in them to have the type of follow-up that most of us would like to experience. But oftentimes, it's not just an issue of the recruiter not doing their job well. It's a misunderstanding of what the recruiting process even involves. Who these recruiters are, what their work environment is like, how they get the business that they're working on, and how they determine which candidates that they're going to be working with at any given time. So I thought it would be helpful to give you a bit of a behind-the-scenes look of a recruiter's world and give you my own recommendations on things that you could do to get a more positive result when looking to engage a recruiter. The first thing that's important to notice is that there are different types of recruiting firms. And in some sense, that could explain why you're having a different type of feel with one over another, or you're receiving different types of information or different types of opportunities from another. The first is retained. In that situation, the recruiter has been paid in part up front by the company that's engaged them to find an employee for them. And then they're typically paid, you know, maybe midway through the search and then paid at the conclusion of the search. So they are essentially an extension of that company in that time frame. And so they might be more willing to even share who their client is, because that client is essentially theirs. It's not private information. They don't have a risk of losing that client. That client's put money on the table. The contingent recruiter, which was what my world was for a majority of my professional background in recruiting, is the type of recruiter that only gets paid at the end of the transaction. So that recruiter could interview and screen and recruit 20 candidates for a company that's looking for a controller. They could invest lots of hours. They could travel to all sorts of association meetings trying to drum up potential candidates. But if through all that process, and maybe their candidate was interviewed several times and was told that, yep, this candidate is one of our top 2, if that company goes with a different candidate, that recruiter's not getting paid. So that recruiter has a lot on the line. They've got to make a lot of decisions pretty quickly to be able to keep assessing, am I investing time in something that has a chance to turn into a successful outcome, that has a chance to turn into a fee? Then the third is a contracted services recruiter, and sometimes you will see those overlapped in these other formats, but the contractual services is more as what we view as temporary opportunities. So this recruiter is really looking for people who can jump on projects, probably start right away, probably have some flexibility in terms of what they're going to be open to doing, where they're going to be open to doing it. If the contracted services is housed in a firm that's also doing permanent type work, long-term search for contingent or retained situations, then there might be that additional piece of how do I balance being open-minded and helping in a temporary capacity, but still wanting to be eligible for consideration for the longer-term opportunities, the opportunities that could allow you to eventually become an employee of the organization. So we're going to talk about that as we go through this discussion, but keep in mind those are the 3 primary types of recruiting firms for you to be aware of. So knowing which one you are engaged with could be helpful for you in terms of strategy. Who is the client? Now this is the tricky thing, because when we go back to the beginning in terms of common complaints, it all comes back to how people feel the recruiter's customer service is. How are they delivering for you? But the tricky thing in this situation is, in most relationships with recruiting firms, the candidate is not putting any money into the process. The company is the one writing the check. So the company is the client. The company is the customer. And so that is where the priority is going to fall across the board in terms of how decisions are made. And that really actually works to your benefit. I mean, there was a time where it was more common for job seekers to pay to try to find themselves a job. And it really was rewritten largely by the staffing industry to become the expectation that, you know what, this is companies investing in their recruitment. Job seekers really aren't in a position to be able to be throwing money around for engaging recruiters, so the onus should be on companies. But with the onus being on companies, with the companies now being the customer, that does change your point of leverage a little bit. So when you're thinking about the times, well, why aren't they calling me back? They're probably on the phone with a customer, or they've probably got a customer that has a need that has to be satisfied soon so they can get paid before they can come and maybe circle back with you for a general update on, you know, what they're seeing in the market that might be a fit for you. So it's not that there's no interest in you, and it's not that there's no value in you. We want to increase the interest in you by giving you some insight as to how to stay on these individuals' radar so you feel more important to them even though you're not necessarily writing the check. So going to the next slide here. Whoops, it's not letting me advance. What is the role of a third-party recruiter? The third-party recruiter is essentially a broker of talent. This is the person in the middle between an organization that's hired him or her to go out and find talent specifically for their need. In some situations, the opportunity that recruiter is working on is confidential. Confidential for a number of reasons. Confidential because the recruiter is not retained for the role, and so they don't necessarily want everybody in town to become aware of what opportunity that they've got a chance to land some business with, or it's confidential because the company is going through an organizational change. They maybe need to replace somebody who doesn't know they're about to lose their job, or they're trying to hire some positions they don't necessarily want their competitors to know they are making some changes with. But they are, in essence, a broker of talent and an extension of that company's recruiting arm. They are not job coaches. They are not job counselors. So if you find yourself in a situation where you've just now found yourself on a job hunt and you're not sure what you really need to be doing, you're not sure what interests you, you don't know how to put your resume together, going to a third-party recruiter with the expectation that they're going to be able to be involved in helping you gain this type of clarity or brush up your presentation skills and learn some new software and get your resume together is not a good strategy. Because think again of who is paying the bill when it comes to recruiting companies. It's the corporate client. So if they are spending their time, every minute they're spending trying to rewrite a resume for you is a minute that is not being spent on an activity that could, in essence, lead to a transaction for their company. So that doesn't mean that there aren't occasions where a recruiter might say to you, gee, you know, you came in to meet with me for this. I think you'd be great for that. This is what I would recommend you make some changes on in your resume so we can sell it appropriately to the customer. That's your cue to take that advice and go do your resume. Go make the adjustments to your resume that individual has shared with you, because you two are working together in a sales process where you both will gain if we manage to get to a point where this transaction is successful. So that third-party recruiter is telling you, in essence, what you need to contribute to the sell, and you want to do what you can to make sure that you're delivering on your part. You are the product, and you are in the best position to make sure to be enticing to a potential buyer. So what does a recruiter need to know in order to work with you? You got to think about what their customer would likely need to know to be willing to not only interview you, but hire you. And hire you not just to pay the salary that you want, but to also cover the fee that is going to be involved with the recruiter making this happen for them. Okay? And so this requires solid information that makes sense. That this is a marketing campaign in a sense. So recruiters need to know what your talents are. And this has to be the truth. What are you good at? Not what sounds nice on a soundbite, because if they get you into the interview process and you say that you are organized and you show up at your interview a collective mess, that doesn't help in the sales campaign, and they're aligning you in a situation that you're not going to have a good chance of a successful outcome. So what are your talents? And these things, these can be things, your talents and your skills. We need to know about your hard skills in terms of, I know MS Word, I know Excel, I know how to do analytics relating to this type of data, I know Spanish, I can drive a tractor. whatever your hard skills are. And then there come the soft skills. How do other people perceive you? And sometimes before you can share with a recruiter what your soft skills might be, you actually need to spend some time with the people in your life asking them what they view those skills of yours to be. Are you a good listener? Do you do well calming people down in conflict? Are you brave in situations where there's a lot of change going on? These types of ideas can give a recruiter a sense of where they might want to try first to align you. What customers, if you mention that you are really good at bringing together accounting systems post-merger, for example, or you're really good at getting employees on the same page with corporate initiatives after some sort of disaster has unfolded. Recruiters are going to be thinking in their mind, what companies do I know that have just gone through a merger? What companies do I know that have intense situations where they have to bring their staff together quickly to get them on the same page in a situation? So we're planting seeds by what we share about ourselves. What are your interests? What's tricky with recruiters is oftentimes people will show up at a recruiter's door being somewhat flexible. I'm interested, not necessarily talking about their interests. This is what I can do. This is what I'm good at. I'm really kind of open to anything at this point. I just need to get working. Well, the tricky thing in that is through the years, many of the people who I've interviewed, I have often thought I would really do a good job playing poker against this person. And I'm terrible at poker. But when you're trying to sell yourself to something that you're not genuinely interested in, so let's say you would really like to, you've got administrative experience and you'd really like to be in a creative environment, but you've just said to that recruiter, you know, I've got administrative experience, I can handle a lot of written copy, but I'm really open to anything. And they align you with a law firm. That's not necessarily going to be a bell ringer for you. And so when you're in that interview phase with their client, it might be easy to convince the client that you can do that job. But if your body language isn't showing interest in the job, that position is less likely to move forward. And if there's any recruiters listening right now that want to chime in, you think it's hard when you're a job seeker to just by yourself without a recruiter to get an employer to hire you if they think there might be a risk involved at all, like maybe you don't really like this job, you wouldn't really want it. It's even more complicated when that potential hiring has a fee on top of it. So they've got two pockets of money to think about when trying to align with you. Another thing that a recruiter needs to know is, what are your limitations? I mean, really, if overtime isn't something you can do, you got to be clear about that. If a commute beyond 30 miles isn't an option, there you go. If you know you can't sit in a desk all day long, make sure they understand this, because it's tricky when, as a recruiter, a job seeker comes to you and hasn't made their limitations clear, and so you start presenting all these options to them, and you get a lot of no, that won't work, no. Or on the other hand, you get a lot of okays, but then maybe they start that job, maybe it's a contractual job, and then all of a sudden you can't live up to the duties of the role. And then either outcome is not good. Either situation does not offer a good outcome. When you're talking about limitations with a recruiter, try to keep that discussion positive. And this is going to be good for you and for the recruiter. Remember, this is a sales process. You guys are kind of working together here to figure out what company is going to be good to go after, what type of role, and what's going to be said in the sales process to make it happen. So when you're talking about limitations, instead of saying, I can't work overtime, I can't drive more than 30 miles, I can't work for less than $12 an hour, whatever it is, You need to find a way to share your limitations in a more positive light, so you don't sound like this negative candidate who's going to be hard to work with, who maybe when I get on the phone with you, you're just going to be telling me even more things that aren't perfect about what I'm suggesting. And a simple way to do that is to just move to the opposite way of explaining things. So instead of saying I cannot work overtime, I'm ideal for opportunities on an 8 to 5 office schedule. Instead of saying I can't commute beyond 30 miles, my commute range is up to 30 miles. Instead of saying I can't work for less than $12 an hour, I'm considering opportunities at $12 an hour or more. See how that sounds more positive? It sounds more engaging. It sounds like we are somehow trying to work together here. I don't feel like you've rained on my parade too much. The other thing recruiters need to know, so important, who you've contacted already. For the contingent recruiter, as I mentioned, they only get paid at the end of the process if the candidate that they present to a company gets hired. There's another little problem that contingent recruiters can experience. If you've already applied to a company, maybe you sent the resume in a month ago or 6 months ago and didn't hear anything or what have you. If I, as the contingent recruiter, have your resume and go to that same company, and even if I do a better job selling you than you did, maybe the way you initially presented yourself was kind of flat, and I come in and I have an inside track and I've got this contact and I'm saying, you know, Amy is really great, look at this, she's got this experience, you know. If that company goes into their personnel records and can see that Amy's already applied with them, I'm out of the equation as the third-party recruiter. They can move forward with Amy without involving me, okay? Because they already have you by their contact system. Now, if I wanted to, in some situations, I could, you know, duke it out and say, well, hey, you had Amy, but you didn't really notice her, and if it weren't for me, this process wouldn't have moved forward. But as a recruiter, especially as a contingent recruiter, you really don't want to get into a situation where you're having these combative moments with employers, and you really don't want to get into a situation where you've taken a lot of time to screen Amy and a lot of time to think about where to sell her, and everywhere you're contacting, they've already seen Amy. And another consequence of that is, as a recruiter, I look like I don't really know what I'm doing, because the company, I'm sure, is wondering, Amy didn't tell you she's already applied to us? So that could be a reason why I might table Amy to the side for a little bit and move on to a candidate that I feel has kept me more informed, so I'm less likely to trip over where she's been and less likely to find myself burning a lot of time in places where I'm never going to get a return out of it. Let's see if it'll let me move here. Sorry about that. After consulting a recruiter, there's a lot you can actually do to take the temperature on how good of a chance you have to be placed by that organization. So, you know, you think about, okay, I went out, I interviewed with this recruiting company, they gave me the impression everything is great, but I haven't heard anything from them since, or, you know, they're not putting me in front of their clients, I don't know what's going on. After you've actually had that initial meeting with a recruiter, it makes a lot of sense to use that time as if you guys are together on a sales team to figure out what was their overall impression of you. And this is one of those things you have to do in a way where they understand you're trying to get this information to know better how to sell yourself in this collaborative relationship that you have with this recruiter. Because if you position yourself in a way where they think by answering this question you're going to maybe take it personally or get upset, or we're going to get into a yeah but this and yeah but that, this conversation's not going to go very far. So after this recruiter's met with you, we want to be asking them, what do they think your marketable skills are? If they were to leave that interview room and go reach out to a client to sell your background to that customer, what would they be focused on? What do they think are your most movable skills? This is great for you to hear, because that way too you know what you might be wanting to think about selling outside of what you're doing with this recruiter. This could give you good perspective. Another thing you want to know is, what skills would make you more marketable to their clients if you had them? This gives you an opportunity, one, to hear their impression of what they think you're lacking, because don't we all wish we knew what people felt we were coming up short with? And two, it gives you a chance to actually go out and get that skill if it's not something that requires, a huge investment of time. Obviously, you can't go get a PhD in a couple of weeks if you've got a bachelor's, but sometimes it might be something as simple as you seem to lack a little bit of confidence in speaking. So maybe if you could enhance your public speaking skills, that would be great. Or you know what, you've been in this environment so long that's primarily been Microsoft based, and you've got Microsoft Word and Excel, but we really need you to have more in the way of the creative lines, like the PowerPoint. That's something you can go get and then come back and say, remember how you mentioned I might be more marketable to your clients if I have PowerPoint? Well, I have it now. Here you go. Another question, how did they feel about your ability to explain your background and sell your skills? Now, this is a big deal, because back in the day, it really wasn't as common as it is now for employers to demand to interview candidates that recruiters were putting forth for all of these different types of roles, especially in contract settings. Back in the day, I had several arrangements where they would call me and say, Lisa, we need an executive assistant to start tomorrow, and I could figure out who I thought it should be and tell them the name, and that person will be there at 8 a.m. There's been a lot of changes where companies, for a whole host of reasons that we don't need to get into today, feel the need to participate more in the actual screening process, and so there are a lot more interviews. And so not only are your skills important to a recruiter, but a recruiter, when they're meeting you, he or she is imagining you selling yourself to their client. And so if there is some hesitation, gee, Lisa comes off a little bit negative, or this is an accounting type of role, and Lisa talks more about touchy-feely things than she talks about numbers. That's feedback that you want to hear, because that could slow down the number of times a recruiter calls you if they're doubting how well you're going to be able to articulate what you've done and what you'll be able to do to their client. That doesn't mean they doubt your skills, because we covered that in the previous question. We want to know how they see you as a partner in the sales process. Any questions are welcome, again, in the chat area, or any recruiters who are watching are welcome to weigh in, say hello. Tips for getting recruiter for career path and locale changes. Okay, yep. We're actually going to get pretty soon, Brandon, to how to find a recruiter that fits you. So, but yes, any recruiters that are actually on the webcast today, you're welcome to chime in with your own thoughts as I speak, or say hi, let everybody know where you're at, the types of positions you fill, that's fine. Limiting factors for recruiters in working with candidates. These are the top 4 that come to my mind. Last resort challenges. Oftentimes there's this hesitation to go to a recruiter, to work with a recruiter. There's a desire to try it on your own first for a while, which that's okay. I mean, sometimes your contacts, if you have them and if you feel good about how you sell yourself, starting there and seeing if you can get a job without having to add the added element of a potential fee, that is absolutely a-okay. last resort challenges, that's what comes about when you've been looking for work for 6 months, 8 months, a year or more. Everybody in town has your resume already. You perhaps haven't been selling yourself well, or you've been selling yourself in too generic of a format, and unfortunately now everybody, you're kind of branded that way across the potential employers. That's tricky for a recruiter, because again, recruiters are brokers of talent. They are not in any way a job counselor. They are not a public service agency. They are not a jobs agency for the government. They are selling something, and they're selling something at a pretty decent rate. This isn't a Walmart experience. So if the product comes to them and has been looking for a long time, hasn't been doing anything in particular during that time, because long job searches happen in this economy now. They just happen for a variety of reasons. It's not necessarily the job seeker's fault. Sometimes the strategy could be different. But I need you to understand, again, from the buyer's perspective, if I'm looking at paying you your salary of $50,000 and this recruiter a fee of maybe $10,000, I'm going to want a candidate that feels like a sure bet for me. And so if this person's already been all over town and everybody else has already said no to them, that doesn't give the sense of in-demand product. Buy this now before somebody else gets him or her, So we've got to be thinking about when to bring them into the fold. Problem backgrounds are also tricky. If you've been fired multiple times, bad things happen in environments from time to time. We are all humans. As much as we're dedicated to our job and as much as we try to play well in the sandbox with others, there will be times in this world where you don't have this perfect match. And in those situations, you explain it in a succinct format and move on. If it's no big deal, you don't want to make it a bigger deal to the recruiter or potential employer. But if you know, for example, you've been fired from your last couple jobs because of attendance, or, I had a gentleman once who openly admitted that he gets into a lot of fights with people and that doesn't always mesh well. Again, as a recruiter who's selling a product, that's kind of like trying to sell a dented car on a new car lot. It's not going to go very far. There are things that individuals who have had problems in their backgrounds can do. Work readiness programs, for example, sometimes starting through shorter-term temp projects where you can prove yourself to an organization might help with that. But it's just so important to understand where some of the recruiter's limitations are. In flexible candidates, that is the individual, for example, who only wants to work in a very specific situation. I only want to work in insurance companies. I only want to work on this part of town, and I only want to work in this type of role. Recruiters sometimes will take a moment to see if they can seek that out. But then what do? If they call all the insurance companies that they know of in the part of town that you mentioned with the type of job that you indicated, what's next? What's plan B? Because that is a definite moment when the phone calls are going to stop, because I have nothing else I can do with you. So that's where it takes a little bit more flexibility on the part that you don't know. When I'm a recruiter, I'm getting jobs a couple of different ways, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later in the cast. But some of the jobs are coming to me because I'm inspiring the idea for the job by reaching out to a company, and some of them are coming to me because a company just already had a specific need, and this is what they said they've got. If a job comes into me that I think somebody could do, that I think pays well within the line of what they're expecting that, is a slight change, I would like to know that I could potentially be able to talk with that candidate about it. And if I can't, if I can only talk to the candidate in these very narrow specific situations, then that's not a high percentage shot that we're going to have a positive outcome. I might try for a little bit, but if I try and no dice, then I'm moving on to another candidate, another product that I might be able to move along faster, that I might be able to take it to a transaction faster. And scope of practice, too, is a big deal. If I am a recruiter in accounting and finance, if that's really my background, and you are an architect, I mean, I might have contacts that I could, in theory, reach out to you for, but I'm probably not the best bet for you. And so when you're looking at aligning with a recruiter, which we're going to talk about next, being aware that some of the reasons why some agencies are slow to place you is because you are actually in a profession that they aren't really known for. They might like you, maybe you were referred to them by somebody who's important to them, but at the end of the day, you want to be sure that the agency that you're working with has some leverage in the field and the industry that you align with. So I see real quick a question from Bob. If you have a solid career but are looking for a new job after a few months of unemployment, how do you best manage the recruiter relationship? I think that actually I'm going to answer a bit in the relationship section. I want to be sure I've understood your question correctly, but that you are actually displaced at the moment and you're trying to figure out how to keep in touch with each other and keep that recruiter interested in you as you're going through this job search. You don't think you have a problem background, you've got good things to sell, and you're trying to stay on that person's radar. That's, I'm assuming, what question you're asking. If I've got that wrong, clarify and let me know, Bob, but we are definitely getting to that coming up in the relationship conversation. Finding the right recruiter, this is really where a lot of the this really clears up a lot of the problem. If you can, in any relationship, in any business relationship, if you can collaborate and pair up with the right appropriate partner, you got a better chance of having the outcome that you're looking for. So some of the things that you want to be asking in this situation out loud or in your mind when you're doing Google searches and background checks on some of these individuals and organizations, again, what industries do they cater to most often? Is this an accounting firm? Is this a generalist that deals in manufacturing? Is this administrative? Is this legal? There are some agencies that do a mixture. They oftentimes will divide what they do into divisions. And in that situation, that can be a little bit tricky. So let's say you're working with, you are an employee, you're a professional who could, in theory, do administrative work. You could, in theory, do accounting work. Well, what do I do in that situation? Looking for a company that has specialized divisions in both of those areas where you could essentially be registered under both umbrellas, have access to recruiters under both of those umbrellas, is a nice way to solve that problem. But you have to ask yourself in that situation. The example that I can give is I came out of Robert Half. I worked at Robert Half for a number of years, and we have office team and we have account temps. Entirely different teams in each of those divisions. So I need to ask, for example, how those same questions that I mentioned before. What do you see as my most marketable skills? What should I be working on? How do you feel I'm selling my background? You need to ask that of the people in office team. And you need to ask that of the people in account temps because their answers could be different. And it might actually give you a sense of, well, if I could go either way, if I could be administrative or if I could be accounting, based on what the recruiters are telling me, maybe I should be leaning more towards accounting because it sounds like I'm a more convincing sell in that situation. It's giving you information. And then you can figure out, then it won't feel so bad if you're sitting on the shelf, what it feels like, for a little bit an office team. Well, maybe it's because, again, you didn't sell yourself, even though you could do administrative work, you didn't really sell yourself as that administrative candidate as well as you sold yourself as that accounting candidate. So I'm not going to be as upset if I don't hear from office team all the time, because now I get it. Now I get that perhaps I'm more convincing as another type of product. What position types do they specialize in? How visible is their recruiting team? This is important for a number of reasons. It should not be hard to find a recruiter. When you think about it, they should be loud and proud essentially about who they are, about the types of industries that they serve, the types of positions that they're working on. They should be the master networkers, okay? So visibility can give you a sense of how credible that recruiter is. If that recruiter is writing magazine articles, if they are being asked to speak at conferences for professional associations that align with what you do, that's a great indicator of credibility. And it also indicates they are probably relatively well connected. Because not only is the visibility of a recruiter important for them finding candidates, the visibility of the recruiter is important for them finding corporate clients to align candidates with. So if I'm kind of this quiet soul in an office in the basement of my house, and I'm not using social media, nobody really knows who I am, that's not to say that those individuals aren't good recruiters. They probably have a different type of relationship. They probably have very specific customers that they work with and a very specific candidate base that they have to go to. But if I am a job seeker myself and I know that I am an experienced lawyer or an experienced CFO, I want to go for the visible players in my industry because I can find them, I can evaluate them to an extent, I can seek out others who have said that they know them, possibly for references, and I can trust that the companies who hear from them, with them representing me, might be more easily swayed because, again, of their visibility. What is their internal structure? This is what I was talking about a little bit ago with the different divisions and having their own reporting systems. You want to know, who am I supposed to be touching base with? How often should I be touching base with you? We don't want to get to a point where we're bothering people, but you also don't want to look like you're not interested because you're not following up with that individual. So do I need to call you once a week to see how things are going? You know, what do I need to do? So here comes this open-ended question at the end of that interview time or in a phone call where we're trying to get a sense of what's going on. You know, I'm seeing a lot of positions starting to open up in this, which is what I do, and it looks like this industry is picking up in these particular companies. That's where I see myself maybe being an asset to you if you wanted to sell me that direction. What is a good way for me to help you keep in the loop of how you might be able to use me with some of your customers? What's a good timeline for follow-up? And then honor that. How do you like to be kept in touch? And if I talk with you, are other members of your team who may also be working on opportunities automatically aware of my availability? Or is this kind of a private lockdown? Would you buy from this person? That's really important when you're evaluating the recruiters that you're meeting with. Because remember, if you are hesitant to do business with somebody who you don't have to pay them any money to help you, what do you think the person who maybe has to pay them a $10,000 or $15,000 fee is going to feel about buying from that person? Do they strike you as credible? You know, looking at the last bullet, how well did they screen you? Did they ask you a lot of questions? Did they show it was important to get a good handle on who you are and what you can do? If they didn't demonstrate that with you, it's hard to have faith that that recruiter is doing a good job vetting the need of the company, that they're asking the company good questions on what that company needs, what they're going to be looking for in terms of skills and talent, what's yet to come in this role 5 years out. You know, part of the problem is that, you know, part of the reason why you may not hear from that recruiter is they're pushing your resume out to situations that they think are a fit. Maybe they've called you on the phone to ask if they can do so. I've got this great job. It looks good. It looks like you meet all of the qualifications, and they send your resume off. But if they didn't really ask that company, if they're not good at asking that company what their need is, the company's going to say, no, this isn't what we need. This isn't what we want. Send me more resumes. And if you've got a recruiter who hasn't demonstrated the ability to be nosy, they might just move you to the tried that pile and get the next group of 5 and keep throwing them at the wall to see what happens. So look at that recruiter and just think to yourself, would I be convinced as a buyer if I had to pay $10,000 to do business with this man or this woman? Are they showing me that they're credible, and are they showing me that they have the ability to assess what a need really is, what my talents really are, so they could have a chance of actually pairing together something meaningful? So Bob, here's the relationships part, and I hope this actually covers your question. One of the starting things that I have to say is when you think about recruiters, you have to remember to treat them like they are the real deal, because they are the real deal. You know, there's this sense that we're not, you know, I could get a real job elsewhere, or you know, I've had situations where I've had interviews scheduled with people, and they called and said, you know, I hope you don't mind if I cancel, but I got this other opportunity to meet with this other person, and that's really important, so I was wondering if I could come and see you tomorrow. That essentially just says in a nutshell, I don't think you're very important. You're not a priority. And it's this myth that, okay, the jobs that are coming through a recruiter may not be the types of jobs that I even want, or it's just going to be a temporary opportunity. All of these transactions involve real money. I mean, this isn't monopoly money. So even if it's an individual who's trying to line you up with contract work, they are definitely real jobs, and you are affecting their brand and their reputation. When you go out, most recruiters guard their name aggressively. I mean, my name when I lived here before was Lisa Wiley. Then I moved to Texas, moved to Maryland, came back to the Lansing area, and now I'm married. So Lisa Wiley Parker is my new name. Not so new. I've been married 8 years, but I don't cling to the Lisa Wiley Parker. It's not hyphenated for sentimental reasons, really. I would be fine just going by Lisa Parker. But I've needed the Wiley component because I was branded as Lisa Wiley as a recruiter when I was out there networking, building relationships, and I needed people to know who I am. Our reputations are crucial to us, because if our name starts getting damaged by the candidates that we're sending, by the positions that we've arranged that have disintegrated, all of a sudden it becomes harder for us to do this job that we have. And if we're a contingency recruiter where we only get paid at the end of a transaction, all of a sudden finding a roof to sleep under and finding a meal to eat could get complicated. So how you treat the recruiter is so important. Showing that you appreciate their world, showing that you appreciate that what you do in front of their customer has a direct reflection on their brand is key. So if you don't look interested in something, if I'm afraid that you're going to go in front of my client and be like, yeah, I could do this job. Yeah, I could do it for you. And then worse, get the job and start coming in late and leaving early and giving notice after 3 months because you found something that you really liked instead, that's not something that I'm going to be able to move forward with. Reciprocity is key. One of the complaints that I mentioned is when people feel like recruiters are, in a way, pumping them for leads. It probably does feel like that, but recruiters can't just, for example, go to Monster and Career Builder and see what jobs are there and just call those companies and see if those companies want their help, because those companies have already got 500 resumes. They probably got the resume of the candidate I'm trying to work with already. So we need to find our job leads kind of in an underground kind of fashion, under the radar through networking channels. And the people who benefit the most from recruiters being able to find those jobs are the people who want jobs, who come to recruiters to help with that. So if you think about what the recruiter's trying to do, it's actually a networking process. You've been around town. Sarah, we're going to get to that, absolutely. You've been around town. You've been in certain organizations. If there's contacts that you know from organizations that you used to work at or associations you belong to or people who are on your reference list who might also be good potential clients for that recruiter, it's not awful for them to want to try to explore that. And it's actually good for you to encourage that, because if you can help them in some way, for example, if you can say to them, ABC company called me for this one position, but I'm not interested in it, I'm going to say no, but maybe you know a candidate that would be a fit. That's generating some sense of, again, we're doing this together. We're a sales team. We're trying to make this happen. And even though that lead didn't help you, if another candidate does the same thing and says, company DEF had this opportunity that wasn't a fit for me that I'm going to say no to, but maybe you'll have luck with it with one of your candidates. And this time that DEF fits you, then it's a gain. But these jobs don't just pop down from out of the sky. Time wasters are big problems for recruiters. Recruiters are personable people as it is. They like to talk. I like to talk. But when you find yourself calling a recruiter every week, or you're talking to them for 20 minutes each time, every time that you are engaged with that recruiter, they are not on the other end of a communication with that paying customer, or they're not involved in a conversation that's going to bring in new customers. So you want your time with that recruiter after that original screening to be timely. You want to be on their radar, and this is something that you've worked out. Okay, every 2 weeks we're going to touch base in some way, shape, or form. And when I touch base with you, I'm not going to get you into a long conversation about my aunt or about this this interview that went wrong or my car. I'm not going to do that. We're going to be very on point. These are some updates about me that you might appreciate. I have this certification now. This might be helpful. I finished Excel. Seeing what's on your horizon, what would be a good day for me to check back with you and see what they say. Proactively contacting your recruiter, Sarah, I think is important. But you don't want to bug the recruiter, but you want to do something helpful. So maybe every 2 weeks I email them a link to a lead. Maybe I saw an article about a company in Lansing that's getting ready to expand. And so that week, I just send that to my recruiter. Saw this, thought this might be helpful. If you see my background fitting here, I'd be more than happy for you to attempt to use it in your sales pitch. That's you guys working together. And then that's more than just calling to say, hey, have you got anything? Have you got anything? Have you heard of anything? Do you have any interviews for me? I guarantee you, the person who calls with tidbits or emails with tidbits of leads, here's this candidate I know you might want to talk to. Oh, my brother-in-law's company is hiring. I don't know if they use recruiters, but you're welcome to check. Candidates who do that type of thing by human nature are going to be more memorable than those who simply call with a feeling of, what have you done for me yet? You haven't done anything for me yet. I'm waiting to see if you've done anything for me yet. I mean, that's not what we're saying truthfully in words, but it's definitely what it sounds and feels like. Why do recruiters cost so much? At the end of the day, if you saw all of the money that went into creating the reach that recruiters have in order to grab candidates and grab companies, it's not a cheap process. They have to brand, they have to market, they have to form strategic alliances, which are sometimes costly. I remember when I was with Office Team, we had relationships with different professional women's organizations. We also had a relationship with Jeopardy, if you can believe that. We sponsored the final Jeopardy question for a while there. Staff and operational expenses, the people who you are working with do get paid. And they get paid once you're placed, and so that's why that dollar amount has to be there. We have building space, liability insurance, the assessment tools, computers, licensing fees. That all goes into the mix. And that's a number, actually, that at the end of the day, companies experience a similar cost, if not more, than what a recruiter's charging when they hire on their own. They just don't always realize it because it's usually scattered around in a lot of different places. You know, $1,000 here, $500 here, $25 there. So seeing it in this lump sum is a shock. Yes, Mark. A typical fee, it typically is a percentage of a salary. I've seen it when the economy was struggling. You saw some flexibility there, maybe 15% of the annualized salary, 20%. It's in the heydays, 25–30% of your annualized salary. So it's a big deal. Thinking that the reason it can be that significant is the more advanced your skills or the more specialized you become, the more of a needle in the haystack type of recruitment we're dealing with. And so I just want you to trust that companies do pay fees all the time. And companies do get used to what their own recruitment process costs them. So I don't want you to feel like you have to be in the middle of deciding what recruiters should and should not be charging. But just know, don't avoid recruiters because you feel like that fee is a sticking point. It really is justifiable. And when the recruiter is servicing the company appropriately, at the end of the day, if they've presented the candidate right, they should be excited to write that check. If they get jittery about writing a $10,000 check to hire you, then there's probably some other hesitations there that it's good that they've come to light. About the complaints then that we mentioned in the beginning, because boy, already it's ticking at 1:30. Recruiters don't call me back. Again, it could be that they don't know what to do with you. You haven't articulated what your talents and skills are. Perhaps they've reached out to you before and gotten a lot of no's because you weren't clear with what your limitations had to be. Maybe they are calling you back, but your teenager's answering the phone and promising to give the message. Lord knows I've had that happen enough. They haven't found me a job yet. Remember, it's not just about them looking for a job for you. You guys are partners. Pick one or two recruiters that you can actually have a partnership with, a collaborative effort, an exchange of leads, an exchange of what are we trying to do now? What are you needing me to sell about myself now? We're working together. Companies want to hire me, but the agency is charging too much. We just talked about that. The recruiters won't tell me the names of the companies they're working with. Again, if it's a retained company, they might be more likely to do so because they've already got that business. But if it's a contingency relationship and I give you the name of my company that I'm working with ahead of time, what's to stop you from just going directly to that company and cutting me out of the process? That company that I worked so hard to try to get the lead and the go-ahead for the position. And they pump me for leads and try to do business with my contacts. I'm hoping that you can see that they have to be master networkers, and they have to do what they can to pull in leads from the people who they're interacting with, because that's really how they're going to get some of the jobs that not everybody knows about. Mark's question, what is your opinion of LinkedIn and job sites like Jimmy Monster? I think LinkedIn is imperative. In fact, John Hill, my predecessor, did an amazing demonstration of the LinkedIn system. There is a LinkedIn tool that anybody can use that's under your Contacts tab in your drop-down area that actually takes you immediately into the alumni tool of the institution you've indicated that you attended, got your degree in. But recruiters will use LinkedIn all the time because you can break it down by demographics. Let's say I'm looking for, right now I know Office Team is looking for people who speak Spanish in Lansing for a project that starts next week. And so I jumped real quick to show Erica over there how to go right to the alumni tool on LinkedIn, and you can actually look. We have 24,000 Spartans on the LinkedIn system in Lansing. You can see this in this tool, and then you can search of those Spartans who has Spanish, and you can see the results there. And so Erica's got people who she's reaching out to right now who she knows have a good shot of fitting her job. If you're not on LinkedIn, that type of thing isn't going to happen. You know, that is definitely a searching point. Job sites like Monster and Career Builder, I think you can still get jobs applying there, but I like to use them more so as for research. It's very uncommon that only one company in an industry is doing well, for example. So if I'm seeing a lot of positions at this plasma company, I might say, okay, I'm putting my resume in here, but there's probably 500 other people who have done the same thing. What other plasma companies are in the Lansing area that I might be able to chase that these other candidates aren't thinking to go after? And then maybe I'm going to that recruiter company. Gee, on Monster, it looks like the plasma industry is getting really big in Denver or wherever I am. I think these pieces of my background would work well in that industry or in that type of company. If any pop up on your mind as potential clients of yours or companies you'd like to be working with, I'd be curious to see what happens if you try to sell my profile to them. So it's just got a little bit more thought into the relationship component when working with these recruiters. So I know we have, where do I start? Do recruiter, you know what? I would say, yeah, you can start with Google. And Carter, I don't know exactly what your background is and where you live. If you're on LinkedIn, you can actually start there. If you're a Spartan and you want to find some other Spartans who are actually recruiters who might even be a little bit more generous with their time and telling you a little bit more about what you need to do to get ready, that's certainly something that's easy to do. Google, if you just put in recruiter, that's tricky. If you go to some of these, find some of these agencies and go to their own job boards and see which recruiter maybe has the most jobs listed, and maybe that's the recruiter that you want to align with because they seem to have a lot of companies that they're generating business out of. I'm imagining you can find recruiter ratings on things like Yelp. Or you could look at their LinkedIn profile and see how many recommendations that they've had. I would go to companies too. Like, for example, if there's a company that you really want to get in with, calling that HR of Dow Chemical, for example, and saying, you know, Dow is really high on my radar and I would like to work for them someday, and I understand that you sometimes bring people in contractually. What staffing agencies, what recruiting companies do you work with so I can align myself with them in the event you reach out to them for your next hiring need and have a shot at coming in that way? If you can get companies to tell you who they enjoy working with, remember, they're the ones who are going to pay the money. That could actually be valuable information for you. So, yeah. And you're welcome, Carter, if that wasn't enough information for you, because I know we're right here at 1:34, gone over a little bit. I'd be happy to. You can email me. That's my email at the top, by the way, folks, for requesting a copy of the recording, but I'd be happy to talk with you further on the subject. And depending on where what market you're in, I know several Spartans who are third-party recruiters who I'm sure would be happy to have a conversation. My contact information is listed on this last slide. For those of you who have hung with us past the end of this cast, I just want to share with you that our next cast is coming up May 9th. Same time, same place, 12:30 to 1:30. Not exactly the same place. I guess we'll have a different link. That cast is going to be on the value of an MBA to a professional and to that professional's employer. And then the fourth Thursday cast in May, which will be the 23rd, is going to be trends in executive education. For those of you who are just kind of curious to see what are people investing in terms of enriching themselves and developing themselves these days. So I hope this cast was helpful to you. I hope it gave you some insight to the recruiting world so you feel you can have more effective relationships with the recruiters that you reach out to. They really are not bad folks at all. They are salesmen first and foremost, juggling often multiple clients at one time, maybe 20 companies and maybe 200 employees, and that can make it tricky to always give what feels like the best customer service response. But if you can be there for them, if you can demonstrate to them that you guys are a team, hey, go white, thanks Brandon, that you guys are a team, I think you're going to stand out more, and I think you're going to be able to move the ball forward faster. So thanks for joining this cast again. We appreciate you. We hope that these professional series are helpful to you. I will leave this up a little bit longer if you need to catch my email or any of my contact information, but I will be turning off my microphone. Thank you, folks.